Alice, I just wanted to get you out of the studio.
Yep.
And just talk to you about Cyber Made Human, your podcast, how you think it's gone for the past year.
Yeah, well, I think I'm really pleased overall with how the show has gone. We had a wish list of guests that we wanted to get on the show, and most of them we managed to get. Those that we didn't, it was generally an issue of calendars and diaries. So I think there's definitely scope to get them on in series 2. And yeah, overall, I'm really, really pleased with how it went.
Amazing. Do you have any specific memories over the past year, sort of your favourite guests, anything like that?
Ooh, favourite guest. It's got to be P. Ducklin, Duck. I think he's someone I used to work with when I worked at Sophos back in 2018. That was my first job in cyber. And he was someone who taught me a huge amount about cybersecurity. And I think his whole approach of being like somebody who demystifies a really technical topic, because he is very technical, was kind of what probably inspired me to launch my company, where we do that for other businesses, where we basically take their difficult, complex topics and turn it into beautiful storytelling, accessible content. And that also inspired the show. And so getting to have him on the show to talk about the quantum apocalypse, one of the most knotty topics we could have chosen, and also sometimes it's quite a scary topic for people. He was chosen to basically showcase what the show's all about, and he was really good at that. And I think that's an episode, as you know, people have referenced. We did a case study on it to show about how to demonstrate and communicate really complex topics. And also clients have mentioned it. They love the fact that it was in my house. Vivian, my cat, was present, and I think it was a really good episode.
You said it yourself there, sort of, you want to make complex topics a lot more human.
Yes.
And less complex.
Yeah.
Was that the inspiration behind the name? I know you sort of had a few ideas with the name.
Yes.
Why Cyber Made Human? What made you stick with that?
I think in cybersecurity, one of the sayings is that the biggest weakness in cyber is human. And there's a lot of companies that say it doesn't matter how much technology you've got in place, if your employees are still clicking on links, or they don't understand, or they don't read contracts, or they don't understand intellectual property rights when using AI, etc., then that's still your weakest link. You really need education, is so important. And so I kind of thought that saying is really well known in the industry, that the biggest weakness is human. And so I wanted to play on that, because the message that we're trying to deliver is that education is the way of solving that issue, and people just need to understand it. And so making entertaining and accessible content was the aim of the show. So that's what made me stick with Cyber Made Human. And initially some people didn't like that name when I hadn't launched it yet. Some people were sort of saying, so I sent it to friends and said, what do you think of these names? But now everybody unanimously agrees, yeah, it really works.
I imagine with that there's been a lot of challenges. I know, having watched all the podcasts,
yes,
there's some brilliant ones out there, but I also know some haven't quite made the cut.
Yes.
So why is that, and so what are some of the challenges that you've had to sort of overcome?
I would say some of the challenges with that, as someone who runs a content marketing agency, who's a podcast producer, makes videos regularly, has worked on some incredible shows with some amazing clients, doing something on my own where I didn't have anyone around me, I held myself to a standard that I couldn't really meet. And especially when, running a business on your own, anybody who has their own company knows it's relentless. There's literally no days off, no time off. You work constantly. And adding this into the mix is something I was really passionate about and wanted to do, but it did always fall. It was never a priority over client work. And that meant I wanted to put it out on the first of every month. And that meant that sometimes the first of the month would creep up and I'd think, oh my God, I haven't edited it, I haven't got the guests sorted, I haven't got the location sorted. So things like all of it was just me. So we had multi-cameras, we had lights, we had guest prep, guest organisation, plus I'm hosting the show. It meant that sometimes it wasn't perfect. But another saying that I like is perfectionism stands in the way of progress. And I was just saying, you've got to put yourself out there and go for it. So some episodes weren't perfect. The first episode, we had James Linton, came all the way down from up north. We'd rented a space for the day, sorted out the aesthetic of it, paid for his trains. And it aesthetically didn't look perfect. But I still put it out. And then we had issues with episodes where the mics weren't on because, as I'm saying, I'm hosting the show, I can't be checking the whole time as well. However, now with you joining the team, we've got Jack, we've got Tilly and Ken. Of course, your priority is still going to be client work, but we are now treating Cyber Made Human as a client, and therefore production needs to be really considered. I'm not going to be managing all of that on my own now. So hopefully we can really elevate that part of the show and I can focus on really compelling conversations with our guests.
I suppose that sort of feeds into the future.
Yes.
Of where you want to go. Series 2 will be coming soon.
Yes.
What lies in the future of Cyber Made Human? Where do you want to go? Where do you see it?
With Series 1, one of my secret goals of the show was to elevate women and showcase some of the incredible women in the industry, because it's very male dominated and a lot of women aren't very self-advocating, and I've talked a bit about why that is, because I put a post out on LinkedIn about why we couldn't get more female guests, and they were saying they get slated in the comments or undermined, etc., etc. And also, I've always been someone who's a bit frustrated to see women leaders or women technical specialists talking about what it's like to be a woman. I just want to talk about the technical specialist. I'd never ask Paul Ducklin, for example, to tell me about what it's like to be a man in cyber, and I don't want to ask women those questions either. So I very much wanted it to focus on that expertise. And I told somebody this recently and they said, that's amazing, that should be a goal of the show, that shouldn't be a secret that you have. And it made me think, wow, I think Series 2 should really be highlighting female leaders. So we've got a wish list of amazing women that we want to get on the show next series. And we've obviously got our studio now, which is amazing. So we've been working on that for about 6 months. We've got a gorgeous studio, which also means that production will be easier because we're already set up. We don't need to be lugging our kit around all the time. We will still do live shows because I think they're really valuable. But the studio is incredible in terms of it being consistent visually and allowing us a really comfortable sanctuary of space to have these great conversations.
Yeah. You've heard some amazing stories.
Yes.
And I know I have, having listened to them. I know my favourite.
Okay.
I want to know your favourite story over the past year.
What's yours?
Ooh. Probably the romance scams.
Yes.
Yeah, it was so interesting just to hear that side of it. And
yeah.
I want to know your
yes.
sort of opinion on that as well.
I'd agree that the romance scams is one that stuck with me. So for those of you who don't know, we did a 3-part mini-series on romance scams, but this is actually infinite. We're going to do as many episodes as we can on that mini-series. And we spoke to investigative journalist Kerry Tomlinson from the US, who went undercover as a victim to expose the tactics. And also Ruth Grover from Scam Haters UK talked about identity theft, primarily with military individuals or former military individuals. And I just think it really opened a door to a kind of psychology of scammers and how they're not victimless crimes. They're very personal and emotional sometimes. And when we hear about phishing or ransomware, sometimes an individual might only lose £500, so it doesn't make the press because they're not a company losing billions or ruining their reputation. But the personal impact of these crimes is still there, and I think romance scams enabled us to showcase that a bit more.
Is it rewarding, this podcast, having done that all yourself, and like the amazing stories that you've heard and people coming in, and is that rewarding?
Definitely, and we did have other people helping us on sometimes short-term basis, so it wasn't completely me all the time. It was just that they weren't necessarily content specialists, and so sometimes I was having to show them how to use the camera beforehand, whereas now thankfully you're pro at editing and pro at setting everything up, so I can just leave you to get on with that. So we did have a little bit of help, but in terms of it being rewarding, very much so. I mean, I love cybersecurity, and I think some people, it sounds like such a clinical, dry topic, but once you uncover it, it's really interesting. And I love the people in cyber. They always have a really good sense of humour. They're very entrepreneurial. It's a relatively new industry. So if you compare it to most other industries, this is so new, which means a lot of the terminology has only been about in the last 5-10 years. So of course people don't know what it means because it's brand new language. And so I feel like I learn constantly, with quantum and AI, that's only come about probably, or been as present in terms of public awareness in the last year since I've launched it. So I learn constantly through doing this show, which I love.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Shall we go and take a look at the studio?
Yes, good idea. Let's do that.
Amazing.